The moment my in-laws announced in front of 60 wedding guests that I had no place at this table, they handed me the deed to everything they owned. They just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. My name is Serena. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 9 years, I have been the person my husband's family called when they needed anything, and I mean anything. Money for a car payment, help with a security deposit, a cosign on a lease, Thanksgiving dinner planned, purchased, and cooked from scratch while my mother-in-law sat in the living room watching the parade. I didn't mind. I genuinely didn't mind, at least not at first, because I thought that's what family does. You show up. You give what you have. You don't keep score. I kept score eventually. Couldn't help it. Before I get into what happened at the rehearsal dinner, let me tell you who I was when I married into this family, because I think it matters. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mom who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry. We weren't poor by every measure, but we were careful. Every dollar had a destination before it landed in her hand. She taught me to work hard and not complain about it, and I took that lesson and ran with it, maybe a little too far. I met my husband, Derek, when we were both 22. He was warm and funny and honestly a little lost. He'd grown up in Nashville with his parents and his younger brother, and his family had this way of orbiting around each other that looked like closeness from the outside. I wanted in. I wanted that. My mom had passed the year before and I was still raw from it, still looking for somewhere to belong. So when Derek's mother, who I'll call my mother-in-law, opened her arms at Christmas that first year and said, "You're one of us now," I believed her completely. I should have noticed sooner that she only said it when she needed something. Over the next few years, Derek and I built a life together. I got my master's degree in healthcare administration, climbed to a director-level position at a hospital network in Nashville, and started making real money, the kind my mom never got to see. Derek worked in logistics, steady but not spectacular. We were a good team. I handled the finances because I was better at it, and neither of us questioned that arrangement. What I didn't fully register, not until much later, was that handling the finances had started to include handling everyone else's finances too. Derek's younger brother, I'll call him my brother-in-law, was getting married. His name is Brandon, and Brandon had always been the golden child. Handsome, charming, the kind of person who could ask for something outrageous and somehow make you feel honored to give it. He got engaged to a woman named Melissa, and from the moment the ring went on her finger, the wedding planning machine started up, and it was pointed directly at me. It started small. My mother-in-law asked if we could help with the venue deposit. Just a loan, she said. They'd pay us back. The venue was $8,000 for the space alone, and the deposit was $2,400. I wrote the check. Derek said thank you on their behalf. Nobody else said anything. Then it was the catering. The caterer they wanted required full payment 6 months in advance, and Brandon and Melissa didn't have it liquid. Could we front it? $4,200. I transferred it. Then the florist. Then the photographer. A specific photographer Melissa had wanted since she was a teenager, which meant a premium rate. Then, hotel room blocks for out-of-town guests, which apparently also needed to be guaranteed on a credit card. Mine. By the time the wedding was 8 weeks out, I had put $48,000 into Brandon and Melissa's wedding, not as a gift. That was never the framing, it was always, "We'll sort it out after," always, "You know we're good for it." But as what I now understand was simply a transfer of my money into their celebration. I want to be clear about something, because I've had people ask me why I didn't say anything sooner. I did say things. I raised concerns with Derek multiple times. He would listen, nod, say he understood, and then his mother would call, or Brandon would stop by, and Derek would come back to me and say, "They really need this, Serena. Can we just do this one thing?" And I would. Because I loved him. Because I still believed we were a team and that the team extended to his family. Because I had been taught that asking for what you deserve is somehow the same as being selfish. I was unlearning that lesson in real time. It just took the rehearsal dinner to finish the course. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday night in late April, at a private room in a restaurant downtown that, yes, I had also paid for 60 people, open bar, 4-course meal. I had organized the seating chart, confirmed the vendor, paid the invoice. I had done all of this while managing a hospital merger at work, while Derek was traveling for a conference, while running on 5 hours of sleep a night for the better part of a month. I arrived that evening in a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I felt, for the first time in weeks, like maybe it was all going to be okay. Like the wedding would be beautiful and everyone would have a wonderful time, and at some point, somehow, the people I had poured myself into would see what I had done and feel something real about it. I found my seat. My name card was at a table in the back corner near the kitchen door, next to Derek's aunt, who I'd met exactly once. The head table, where Derek's parents sat, where Brandon and Melissa sat, where the siblings and closest family were placed, had no card for me. I thought it was a mistake. I genuinely thought it was an oversight, because what else would it be? I found my mother-in-law near the bar and touched her arm and said, "I think there may be a mix-up with the seating. I don't see a spot for me up front." She looked at me, not unkindly exactly, but with a kind of careful patience, the way you explain something to a child you've already explained it to twice. "We wanted to keep the head table to immediate family," she said. "Blood family, you understand." I did not understand. "I'm Derek's wife," I said. "Of course," she said. And then she turned back to her conversation. I stood there for a moment. The room was full of people talking and laughing, glasses catching the candlelight, the whole scene warm and golden. I had built this. Every single element of this evening had been organized and funded by me, and I was being placed at the back of it. I went to my assigned seat. I sat through dinner. I smiled at Derek's aunt, who was perfectly lovely and had no idea anything was wrong. I ate my meal. I did not make a scene. I want you to know that, because I think sometimes people expect the moment of realization to come with raised voices and slammed doors, and mine didn't. Mine came quietly, somewhere between the salad and the entree, when I looked at the head table and watched my mother-in-law laughing with Melissa's mother. The two of them bent toward each other like old friends, and I thought, she will never see me. Not because she can't, because it doesn't benefit her to. I excused myself to the restroom and sat in a stall for 4 minutes and let myself feel it. Really feel it, the full weight of 9 years. And then, I made a decision. Not about revenge. I want to be precise here, because revenge has a particular flavor to it, something hot and reactive, and what I was feeling was cold and quiet and very, very clear. I decided that I was done funding a life in which I did not exist. That's all. It sounds simple. It was the hardest thing I'd ever decided. I went back to the table. I finished dinner. I drove home alone because Derek was staying late to help with something, and I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and I started pulling documents. Here is something people don't always realize about being the person who manages the finances. You know everything. I knew every account, every debt, every loan that had gone out under my name, or our joint name. I knew which of Brandon's loans had been formally documented and which had simply been verbal assurances from people who, I now understood, had never intended to formalize anything. I knew that the catering payment, $4,200, had been charged to a card that was in my name alone. I knew that the hotel room block guarantee was tied to my personal credit. I knew that if I contacted the vendors directly, I was the client of record. I also knew something else. About 8 months earlier, my mother-in-law had come to me with what she called an investment opportunity. She and my father-in-law owned a rental property, a small commercial space they'd held for years, and they were looking to do some renovations and expand the lease income. She asked if I would be willing to be a co-investor, contribute toward the renovation costs, and take a formal equity stake. She had paperwork drawn up. I reviewed it, I had my own attorney look at it, and I signed it. My contribution was $22,000. In exchange, I held a 30% ownership stake in the property and had co-signature rights on any decisions involving the asset. At the time, I thought it was a gesture of inclusion, a sign that they saw me as real family. By the time I sat down at my kitchen table the night of the rehearsal dinner, I understood it differently. They had needed capital. I was a source of capital. That was the entirety of my role in this family. I pulled the property agreement out of my files. I read it again carefully. My attorney had been thorough. My rights were clearly documented. I picked up my phone and sent her a message. I need to talk Monday morning. Please, block an hour. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. The wedding was Saturday. I went. I wore the dress I'd planned. I smiled at the right moments. I danced with Derek. I watched Brandon and Melissa say their vows in front of flowers I'd paid for, in a venue I'd helped book, with a photographer I'd written a check to, and I felt, strangely, at peace. Because I already knew how the next chapter went, and it didn't look like this room. I also, at the reception, had one conversation that mattered. I found myself next to a man I'll call Richard. He was Melissa's uncle, it turned out, a commercial real estate attorney from Atlanta who had a dry sense of humor and seemed, like me, to be observing the party from a slight remove. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. At some point he said, "What do you do?" And I told him, and his eyebrows went up slightly, and he said, "Healthcare administration at that level. You must have an incredible eye for contracts." "I'm learning," I said. He handed me his card. "If you ever want a second opinion on something, I'm good at what I do." I put the card in my purse. Monday morning, I was on the phone with my attorney by 8. I laid out everything. The $48,000 in wedding-related expenses, the property stake, the paper trail. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Serena, you have more leverage here than you probably realize." She was right. Over the following 3 weeks, while Derek's family was posting honeymoon photos on Facebook and tagging my mother-in-law in comments about what a beautiful wedding it was, I was working. Quietly, methodically, the way I'd always worked. I contacted the vendors where I was the client of record and updated the billing contacts. I spoke with the bank about the credit card charges. And I had a formal conversation with a commercial real estate broker, a colleague of Richard's, as it turned out, about the current market value of the property I co-owned. The property, I learned, had appreciated considerably. The renovations we'd funded had done their job. A buyer had already expressed interest through another broker. My mother-in-law had apparently been in early conversations without mentioning it to me. Her co-owner who had contractual approval rights over any sale. That was the moment it shifted from leverage to something more serious. My attorney sent a formal letter. Not aggressive, precise. It outlined my ownership rights, noted that I had not been consulted on sale discussions as required by our agreement, and indicated that I was prepared to exercise those rights fully. It requested a meeting. I want to tell you about that meeting because it was nothing like the confrontations you see in movies. There were no raised voices. My mother-in-law arrived at my attorney's office looking composed, her husband beside her, and she looked at me across the conference table with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. She recognized that she had miscalculated. The conversation that followed was practical, legal. My attorney did most of the talking. The outcome, ultimately, was a formal settlement, a structured repayment of the $48,000 in wedding expenses. Documented now, no more, we'll sort it out. Plus a buyout of my property stake at current market value, which was significantly more than my original $22,000 investment. I signed the agreement 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner. I need to tell you about Derek because I know that's what you're wondering. Our marriage didn't survive this, not exactly in the form it had been. We tried. We went to counseling for several months, and those sessions were honest in a way our conversations at home had never quite been. Derek is not a villain in this story. I want to be clear about that. He was conflict avoidant in a way that had made him complicit without him fully understanding it, and when he finally understood it, the understanding hurt him. It hurt us both. We're separated now. It's sad, and it's true, and I've made my peace with it. What I haven't made peace with, And what I don't think I need to make peace with is the version of myself I was before the rehearsal dinner. The one who kept absorbing and absorbing because she believed that was how you proved you were worth keeping. I don't miss her. I'm not angry at her. But I'm glad she sat in that bathroom stall long enough to make a different decision. I'm also glad she held on to a real estate attorney's business card from a wedding reception. There's something I want to say directly because the comment sections on these videos are full of people asking, why? Why didn't you leave sooner? Why did you give so much? Why did you let this happen? And I get it. I asked myself those questions too. But here's what I know now. When you grow up understanding love as a transaction, as something you earn by being useful, it takes a long time to recognize when the transaction has stopped being fair. It takes even longer to believe you're allowed to stop. Not because you're weak, because you were taught that stopping is the same as failing. It isn't. I live in a different apartment now. It's smaller than the house Derek and I shared, and it overlooks a parking garage, and I love it completely. I made a standing rib roast for myself at Christmas, and I ate it in front of a movie, and I didn't coordinate anything for anyone, and it was the best holiday I've ever had. A few months ago, I ran into my mother-in-law at a grocery store. We were both in the produce section. She looked at me and I looked at her and she said, "Serena." And I said, "Hi." And we both kept moving. That was enough. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I genuinely love knowing where you all are. And if any part of this story sounds like your own life, I want you to know. The moment you realize your worth is not defined by how much you're willing to absorb, that moment belongs to you. No one can schedule it for you, and no one can take it away. If this reached you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And I'll see you in the next one. I've thought a lot about the word family since that night. What it actually means versus what we're taught it means. Growing up, I believed family was the people who showed up for you, unconditionally, without a ledger running in the background, and I held on to that belief so tightly for so long that I couldn't see when the people around me had a completely different definition. To my mother-in-law, family was blood. To Brandon, family was whoever was useful. To me, family was the people I'd chosen to love without condition. That mismatch cost me 9 years and $48,000 before I finally let myself read the room clearly. What I know now is that the way people treat you is always telling you something true about them. Not about you, about them. My mother-in-law didn't seat me at the back of that rehearsal dinner because I had failed to earn my place. She seated me there because she had never intended to give me one. That distinction matters. I spent years trying to work harder, give more, show up better, believing that if I just did enough, I would finally be seen. What I didn't understand is that you can't work your way into someone's heart if they've already decided you don't belong there. No amount of effort changes that. Only honesty does. The hard part, the part I had to sit with, was my own role in it. I wasn't a passive victim in this story. I was an active participant who kept choosing not to see what was in front of me. Every time Derek came back with, "Can we just do this one more thing?" I had a choice, and I chose comfort over clarity. I chose the idea of belonging over the reality of what I actually had. That's not weakness, exactly. It's human. But at some point, continuing to ignore what you know is its own kind of dishonesty. Toward yourself, most of all. The thing about Serena before that bathroom stall is that she wasn't dumb. She was afraid. Afraid that if she stopped being useful, she'd stop being wanted. And that fear had a name and a history that had nothing to do with Derek's family at all. It went back further, to a girl who lost her mother young and decided the safest way to be loved was to be needed. Understanding that didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me somewhere to put it that wasn't rage or shame. What I want to say, if you're somewhere in the middle of your own version of this, still giving, still hoping, still telling yourself it'll even out eventually, is that the moment you stop is not the moment you fail. It's the moment you start taking yourself seriously. Seriously enough to say, my time, my money, my energy, my presence, these are not unlimited resources that exist for other people's comfort. They are mine, and I decide what they're worth. Serena isn't the ending of this story. She's the beginning of the next one, So are you.